All India Radio presents Morning News. Good morning, I'm Sunil Verma and with me is Saira Mujtaba. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Washington, D.C. on a 4-day visit to the United States. Prime Minister to meet U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and top CEOs of American companies today. To also hold bilateral meetings with his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison and Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga. G4 countries comprising India, Brazil, Germany and Japan emphasize the need to reform UNSC to make it more legitimate, effective and representative. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for mutual recognition of vaccine certificates to make international travel easier. COVID vaccination coverage crosses 83 crore mark in the country. India and UAE to hold the first round of negotiations for Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement today. Leh to host the first edition of Himalayan Film Festival beginning tomorrow. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals beat Sunrisers Hyderabad by 8 wickets in Dubai. As the nationwide free COVID-19 vaccination campaign at government facilities for those above 18 years is underway, we advise our young listeners to get vaccinated and also help others get vaccinated. We also advise our listeners not to lower their guard as COVID-19 remains a threat to our health. Please stay at home unless it is essential to go out and continue to follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in details. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Washington, D.C. this morning on a 4-day visit to the U.S. Braving rain, hundreds of Indian community members gathered at the airport to welcome Mr. Modi. As the Prime Minister's plane landed in Washington, exuberant members of the Indian diaspora started cheering. Mr. Modi has thanked the Indian community in Washington, D.C. for the warm welcome. In a tweet, he said, "Our diaspora is our strength." Mr. Modi said, "It is commendable how the Indian diaspora has distinguished itself across the world." During his visit, the Prime Minister will address the UN General Assembly and attend the Quad Leaders Summit, as well as hold a bilateral meet with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House. Today, Mr. Modi will interact with top CEOs of U.S. companies. He will also hold bilateral meetings with his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison and the Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga. Mr. Modi will have a one-on-one meeting with the U.S. President Kamala Harris. And now we go over live to our correspondent Saubhagya Tara in Washington, D.C. for the latest update on the Prime Minister's visit. Saubhagya, please give us a sense of the atmosphere there on Prime Minister's arrival in the United States.
Sunil, light drizzle welcomed Prime Minister at the Andrews Air Base in Washington. You must have seen the visuals, Prime Minister himself holding an umbrella while alighting from the aircraft. There are also many Indian community members greeted him. It is said that the rains are the harbinger of positivity and hope, and the same is all set to be reflected as the Prime Minister interacts with the top political and business leaders. Sunil, Prime Minister was also greeted by many Indians at the Willard International Hotel where he is staying.
Saubhagya, what would be his engagements during the entire day in Washington?
Sunil, the Prime Minister's first engagement on Thursday in Washington, D.C. is an interaction with the top CEOs of U.S. companies. These include the CEOs of Qualcomm, Adobe, First Solar, Blackstone and General Atomics. Later in the day, he will hold bilateral meetings with his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison and the Japanese Premier Suga. He will also have a one-to-one meeting with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. They would explore likely to be said areas in cooperation in science and technology.
Thank you, Saubhagya, for that update. Earlier, in his departure statement, the Prime Minister said his visit to the United States will be an occasion to strengthen the comprehensive global strategic partnership with that country and to consolidate relations with India's strategic partners, Japan and Australia, to take forward collaboration on important global issues. Mr. Modi said he will review the India-US Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership with President Joe Biden and exchange views on regional and global issues of mutual interest.
Indian Ambassador to US Taranjeet Singh Sandhu has said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to US has 6 broad elements.
Prime Minister's visit to United States has 6 broad elements. So first is, of course, bilateral meeting with President Biden. Second is the meeting with the Vice President Kamala Harris. Third is the Quad Summit. Fourth is the interactions with Prime Ministers of Australia and Prime Minister of Japan separately. Then there is an interaction with select industry leaders. And finally, there is the UN section.
Mr. Sandhu said the Quad is a grouping of like-minded countries that have come together to focus on international issues and problems.
3-4 मुद्दे हैं जिसपे काफी स्ट्रांग कोऑपरेशन और पार्टनरशिप होगी। पहला वैक्सीन्स का है। चारों कंट्रीज अपनी स्ट्रेंथ है उसको पूल टुगेदर कर रही हैं। यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स टेक्नोलॉजी दे रहा है, जापान फाइनेंस कर रहा है और ऑस्ट्रेलिया अपनी लिफ्ट पावर दे रहा है और इंडिया प्रोडक्शन कैपेबिलिटी में और कैपेसिटी में बहुत स्ट्रांग है, वो मैन्युफैक्चर करेगा। तो उसी तरह से डिजिटल और फ्यूचर टेक्नोलॉजीज में वो सेकंड पहलू और थर्ड इज क्लाइमेट चेंज। चारों लीडर्स कमिटेड हैं एंड इसमें भी बहुत पोटेंशियल है इन्वेस्टमेंट्स का। चारों इकट्ठे होके एक दूसरे की इसमें मदद करेंगे।
The scientific community and entrepreneurs in the United States have welcomed the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the US. They expressed hope that it will enhance collaboration and exchange of ideas between the two countries. Talking to All India Radio from San Diego, the Chief Scientific Officer and founder of Triangulum Biopharma, Dr. Sanjay Pandey said it will give a fillip to the spirit of innovation.
It gives me great honor to welcome Prime Minister Modi ji to the United States. From a scientific point of view, an Indo-US collaboration on an ongoing basis would foster mutual benefits in research and development. This can be accomplished by holding regular in-person workshops, engaging US-trained Indian scientists and professionals with Indian students across Indian academic institutions. In addition, creating an entrepreneurship ecosystem across India, especially Northern India, by engaging US-trained entrepreneurs would foster scientific growth. I want to applaud Modi ji's government on the improvement and efficiency of obtaining an e-visa for US citizens.
The foreign ministers of G4 countries comprising India, Brazil, Germany and Japan have stressed on the urgency of reforming the United Nations Security Council in order to make it more legitimate, effective and representative. The foreign ministers of the G4 countries, India's S. Jaishankar, Brazil's Carlos Alberto Franco Ranca, Germany's Heiko Maas and Japan's Toshimitsu Motegi, met on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York last night. The ministers issued a joint statement following the meeting in which they reaffirmed that it is indispensable to reform the Security Council through an expansion of both categories, permanent and non-permanent seats, to enable the Security Council to better deal with the ever-complex and evolving challenges to the maintenance of international peace and security, and thereby to carry out its duties more effectively. The G4 ministers reiterated their support for each other's candidatures as aspiring new permanent members in a reformed Security Council, the statement noted. The 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly continues for the third successive day. Leaders from the United Kingdom, Jordan, Venezuela and Ukraine are scheduled to address the August gathering in New York. As per tradition, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres opened the high-level debate with a call for solidarity among the nations in a divided and polarized world. He also urged the member nations to commit to a 45% cut in carbon emissions by 2030. The in-person address will continue till 27th of this month. Over 100 global leaders shall be attending the deliberations. Meanwhile, global community has raised concerns amid reports that Taliban has asked for an address on the concluding day of the ongoing UN General Assembly session. Germany has said the Taliban request and the purported show by the new rulers does not serve any purpose. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas told the media in New York that what's important are concrete deeds and not just words, including on human rights.
You're listening to the morning news on All India Radio. A reminder of the headlines before we move on. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Washington, D.C. on a 4-day visit to the United States. Prime Minister to meet U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and top CEOs of American companies today, to also hold bilateral meetings with his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison and Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga. G4 countries comprising India, Brazil, Germany and Japan emphasize the need to reform UNSC to make it more legitimate, effective and representative. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for mutual recognition of vaccine certificates to make international travel easier. COVID vaccination coverage crosses 83 crore mark in the country. India and UAE to hold the first round of negotiations for Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement today. Leh to host the first edition of Himalayan Film Festival beginning tomorrow. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals beat Sunrisers Hyderabad by 8 wickets in Dubai. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle @AIR News Alerts.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for mutual recognition of COVID vaccine certificates to make international travel easier. In his remarks at the Global COVID-19 Summit, Mr. Modi said there is a need to focus on addressing the pandemic's economic effects.
India and the South Africa have proposed a TRIPS waiver at the WTO for COVID vaccines, diagnostic and medicines. This will enable rapid scaling of the fight against the pandemic. We also need to focus on addressing the pandemic economic effect. To that end, international travel should be made easier through mutual recognition of vaccine certificates.
The Prime Minister said earlier this year, India shared the vaccine production with 95 other countries and with UN peacekeepers. And like a family, the world also stood with India when it was going through a second wave. He thanked all for the solidarity and support. The Prime Minister said, as newer Indian vaccines get developed, Government of India is also ramping up production capacity of existing vaccines.
As our production increases, we will be able to resume vaccine supply to others too. For this, the supply chains of raw materials must be kept open. Our grassroots level healthcare system had delivered over 800 million vaccine doses so far. Over 200 million Indians are now fully vaccinated. This has been enabled through the use of our innovative digital platform called CoWIN.
India's vaccination coverage has crossed 83 crore mark. The Union Health Ministry said more than 61 crore vaccine doses were administered as first dose and over 21 crore vaccine doses were given as second dose. The ministry said more than 64 lakh vaccine doses were administered till 7 p.m. yesterday.
The first round of Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement or CEPA negotiations between India and UAE will be held today. A new strategic economic agreement is expected to increase bilateral trade in goods to $100 billion within 5 years. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal and Minister of State for Foreign Trade of United Arab Emirates Dr. Sani bin Ahmed Al Ziyadi yesterday formally launched India-UAE CEPA negotiations. Both ministers emphasized that CEPA will create new jobs, raise living standards, and provide wider social and economic opportunities in both the nations. Dr. Sani bin Ahmed Al Ziyadi and a high-level UAE delegation is in New Delhi to hold talks aimed at improving bilateral economic relations, including expanding the existing trade and investment relationship. Both sides will aim to conclude negotiations by December this year and sign a formal agreement in March 2022 after the completion of internal legal procedures and ratification. Road Transport and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari has said the government has been at the forefront in supporting the industry by realigning its policies towards creating a business-friendly and hassle-free environment. Addressing a webinar on ease of business for driving investment in roads and highway sector, the minister said the country is passing through a very challenging time both on account of the health of the people and the economy of the nation due to the pandemic. He said there now seems to be positivity slowly coming all around across the globe. The minister said various initiatives and schemes of Roads and Highways Ministry speaks volumes of the hard work and commitment that has gone into such efforts.
The Commission for Air Quality Management has said that Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Delhi have developed detailed monitorable action plans to tackle the problem of agricultural stubble burning and air pollution. The plans have been formulated based on the framework made by the Commission, and directions have been issued for strict implementation of the action plans. The Environment Ministry said 1,43,801 machines are already available for crop residue management. It said another 56,513 machines are being procured in the current year. The ministry said directions have been issued for adopting a standard protocol developed by Indian Space Research Organisation for recording and monitoring the fire counts owing to stubble burning. The Uttar Pradesh government has recommended a CBI investigation into the death of the president of Akhil Bharatiya Akhada Parishad, Mahant Narendra Giri. He was found dead in mysterious circumstances at his Baghambari Mutt residence in Prayagraj on Monday. The inquiry has been recommended to the centre by the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. Police has already filed an FIR in the case and arrested Mahant Narendra Giri's disciple, Anand Giri, whose name surfaced in the suicide note allegedly written by the departed saint. Prayagraj Police has also set up an 18-member SIT of police officers for investigation of the case. Yesterday, the post-mortem of the dead body of Narendra Giri was conducted and his mortal remains were given samadhi at his mutt as per his desire expressed in the suicide note. In Jammu and Kashmir, one terrorist was killed in an encounter with security forces at Keshwa village in Chitragam of Shopian district last night. The slain terrorist has been identified as Anayat Ashraf, who was earlier working as an overground worker and was also involved in drug trafficking. One pistol and ammunition has already been recovered from his possession.
Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur will inaugurate the first edition of the Himalayan Film Festival, THFF, tomorrow. The festival, spanning 5 days, is being held at Leh in Ladakh and will continue till the 28th of this month. Ladakh is hosting the film festival as part of the celebrations of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav to commemorate 75 years of India's independence. The inaugural day of the festival will witness the presence of makers and cast of the recently released movie Sher Shah, including director Vishnu Vardhan and lead actor Siddharth Malhotra. The 5-day festival also aims to create an interactive and exposure platform to promote aspiring local filmmakers and to showcase Ladakh as an attractive film destination.
As our nation celebrates the 75th year of independence, a series of events is being organized by the government as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Let's listen now to our special program, Azadi Ka Safar.
Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav.
Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. India's glorious fight for freedom is one of the greatest struggles the modern world has ever witnessed. AIR News brings you a glimpse of the valiant struggle every day.
In today's episode, we bring you the story of the great revolutionary freedom fighter, Rao Tularam. The day marks the death anniversary of this great leader of the First War of Indian Independence of 1857, who fought against the colonial British forces in Haryana, where he is considered a state hero.
Rao Tularam was born on 9th December 1825 in Rampura suburb of Rewari to Puran Singh and Gyan Kaur, and ruled Rewari for 18 years from 1839 to 1857. In 1857, after the rebellion in Meerut and other places, he rose up to support the uprising.
He also helped rebel forces fighting in Delhi with soldiers and resources. He also temporarily succeeded in driving out the British from the southwest Haryana during the rebellion.
On 17th May 1857, Rao Tularam, along with his cousin Rao Gopal Dev and a group of his followers, deposed the local Tehsildar. He raised a force of about 5,000 soldiers and set up a workshop in the fort of Rampura for manufacturing the guns and other ammunition.
Rao helped Emperor Bahadur Shah and other rebel forces who were waging war against the British in Delhi and sent 45,000 rupees along with large quantities of necessary commodities to him. But this help could not protect Delhi, which fell to the British on 20th September 1857.
Soon after, Brigadier General Showers led a column from Delhi to attack and destroy Rao and his followers in Rewari. Showers sent a messenger to Tularam telling him that if he surrenders along with his guns and arms, he would be treated on merits. But Tularam turned down the proposal.
British officer then sent a strong column under Colonel Gerard on November 10, 1857, which occupied the abandoned fort of Rampura. On November 16, Colonel Gerard marched to Narnaul, where the rebel forces led by Rao Tularam's cousin, Rao Krishan Singh, fought against them.
Tularam's forces fought bravely against the British. As the first charge of rebel forces scattered the British, Colonel Gerard was mortally wounded in the attack. Several other British officers were also killed or injured.
But the British forces successfully retaliated with full force and heavy bombardment. The Battle of Narnaul was one of the most decisive battles of 1857.
After suffering loss and destruction in the Battle of Narnaul, Rao Tularam moved into Rajasthan and joined the forces of Tantia Tope. But the forces of Tantia Tope were also defeated by British in the Battle of Sikar in Rajasthan. Thereafter, Rao left India to seek help from the Shah of Iran, Dost Muhammad Khan, the ruler of Emirate of Afghanistan, and Alexander II, the Emperor of Russia, against the British colonial empire.
For his defiance, Rao Tularam's estates were confiscated by the British. On 23rd September 1863, he died in Kabul in Afghanistan at the age of 38 due to an infection that spread throughout his body. Till his last breath, Rao attempted to forge alliances to fight against British imperialism.
A two-day Shahidi Mela is held annually in September at Rampura suburb of Rewari city to commemorate the death anniversary of Tularam. The Government of India issued a postage stamp on 23rd September 2001 featuring Rao Tularam. India is forever indebted to the selfless service and sacrifice of martyrs like Rao Tularam.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. See you in the next episode tomorrow.
As part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, AIR News is airing stories of courage, valor and determination of unsung heroes of Indian freedom movement in our series Veer Gatha at 4:45 p.m. in Parikrama program. In today's episode of Veer Gatha, we will bring you the saga of Ramchandra Vidyarthi.
आजादी के अमृत महोत्सव के पावन अवसर पर आकाशवाणी समाचार के कार्यक्रम परिक्रमा में गुरुवार को शाम 4:45 पर सुनिए देश की आजादी की लड़ाई में अपना अमूल्य योगदान देने वाले भारतीय स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के सिपाही की वीर गाथा।
In the program Spotlight, the News Services Division of All India Radio is broadcasting a special series, Seva aur Samarpan, 20 Saal Sushasan Ke. Today's theme is Digital India, Financial Inclusion. It showcases Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision on digital financial inclusion and inclusive development of India. The special program can be heard tonight on FM Gold channel and additional frequencies from 9:15 p.m. onwards. Also, raising awareness about coronavirus tonight, we have Dr. Mona Desai from Ahmedabad, who will participate in Corona Jagrukta series and answer the queries of listeners from 9:30 to 10 p.m. So keep listening to All India Radio News for the latest developments.
On to sports now. In IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals defeated Sunrisers Hyderabad by 8 wickets at the Dubai International Stadium last night. Chasing a target of 135 runs, Delhi overhauled the score in 17.5 overs. Shreyas Iyer, who was making his comeback after an injury, was the top scorer for his team, contributing unbeaten 47 runs. Earlier electing to bat, Hyderabad posted a total of 134 runs, where no batter was able to cross the mark of 30 runs. Today, Mumbai Indians will take on Kolkata Knight Riders at Sheikh Zayed Stadium in Abu Dhabi at 7:30 p.m.
And now let us take a look at the weather forecast for today. The national capital Delhi will have generally cloudy sky. Light rain is also predicted. The temperature will vary between 25 and 32 degrees Celsius. Mumbai to have generally cloudy sky with heavy rain. Chennai is expected to have generally cloudy sky with light rain. Kolkata will have generally cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. In Srinagar, the temperature will hover between 14 and 30 degrees Celsius. Jammu will have partly cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. Leh registered a minimum temperature of 8 degrees Celsius. The maximum is likely to be 24 degrees. Gilgit will have generally cloudy sky with possibility of rain or thunderstorm or dust storm. Muzaffarabad will have the thunderstorms. Most of our northeastern cities, including Guwahati, Imphal, Shillong, as well Kohima, Itanagar and Gangtok, will have cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. Visakhapatnam will have generally cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers, and Puducherry may have thunderstorm with rain.
And now an overview of today's newspapers. The Prime Minister, currently in the US, says he will focus on COVID, terror and climate crisis at UN, writes the Times of India. Rupees 50,000 for each COVID death, headlines The Hindu. Centre OK's ex gratia, state funds to cover it, writes the Indian Express. UK approves Covishield after India's protest, but vaccine certification issue still hangs fire, writes the Hindu Business Line. May too far. Supreme Court allows women to take NDA exam in November itself, writes the Pioneer. Taliban wants to address UN General Assembly, name Shaheen as envoy, reports the Asian Age. WHO tightens air quality norms over health hazard, reports Hindustan Times. By new standards, Delhi had no good air days this year, writes the paper. As per WHO, air pollution kills 7 million a year, writes the Times of India. And finally, on World Rhino Day yesterday, 2,500 horns turned to ashes in Assam, writes the Hindu.
And now, before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Washington, D.C. on a 4-day visit to the United States. Prime Minister to meet U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and top CEOs of American companies today, to also hold bilateral meetings with his Australian counterpart, Scott Morrison, and Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga. G4 countries comprising India, Brazil, Germany and Japan emphasized the need to reform UNSC to make it more legitimate, effective and representative. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for mutual recognition of vaccine certificates to make international travel easier. COVID vaccination coverage crosses 83 crore mark in the country. India and UAE to hold the first round of negotiations for Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement today. Leh to host the first edition of Himalayan Film Festival beginning tomorrow. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals beat Sunrisers Hyderabad by 8 wickets in Dubai. And with that, we end the morning news. Have a nice day.